I've been asked quite a few times how much my camper van conversion cost me, so hopefully this video will answer most questions that people have. If you're not interested in the detail, the totals and a summary are at the end of the video. If you're interested in the detail of spend for each of the stages, then you might need to press pause as we go along. If you haven't already seen them, this will make more sense if you take a look at one of the van tours, or if you've got the time, maybe take a look at the full build video. So just to give it some context, the majority of the work was done at the back end of 2018 and into early 2019, although there has been additional spend since then. All the numbers are pounds sterling, and I haven't included shipping costs. The video covers the spend for each of the stages of the conversion. Sometimes it was cheaper to buy in bulk, and I'll indicate how much I had left over in each case. I haven't included the cost of the van purchase because ultimately that's going to be down to what you can afford. Speaking from personal and very expensive experience, I can recommend that you invest as much as you can in the donor vehicle. If I'd had an extra pair of hands, I would have done the window myself, having already helped my daughter fit hers. Obviously the work lights and the reversing camera are also optional, but really useful when you're out and about, especially if you're in the middle of nowhere. I can't recommend strongly enough sealing off the trim on the Sprinter. It's a known issue, and if you don't, water will get into your insulation. I used the isopropyl alcohol to clean all the surfaces and then painted any grotty bits with the white hammerite. I didn't use all the wood battens for the floor, and they were carried over for the furniture build. Bonding the foam flooring to the panels isn't really necessary for most people's needs. I did it because I would be in sub-zero conditions for 3 or 4 months of the year. And you definitely don't need that much aluminium foil tape. It was just overkill on my part. Nothing much to add here except that the Morland wall board was cheaper in volumes greater than I needed, but we managed to repurpose what was left over on my son's Vito van conversion. I've split the furniture build into 2 parts. First part is the frames, the carcasses, the sofa bed, and the second part is kitting them out with the drawers and the hatches for the cupboards and all the other bits and bobs. As you can see, the lightweight laminated plywood from Morland is the biggest part of the spend. I had 1 board left over, and we used that to build an overhead shelf in the cabin of my daughter's Sprinter camper van. Never having made any drawers before, I have to say that the Bloom soft closing drawer kits were really easy to use and highly recommended. Biggest spend here is obviously the fridge, and this is the 12 volt only power source version of the Webasto Cruise Elegance. Obviously the big ticket item in the water setup is the Thetford cassette toilet. I chose this one because it gave me an extra 15 litres of water, albeit to flush the toilet. I did save some money on the shower tray, but the epoxy was £74, so probably about the same. The rest of the spend is basically just loads of parts that allow you to join everything together. Okay, this is where it starts to get really expensive with the Webasto boiler and the X100 hob. Whilst fitting the dual top Evo and the hob wasn't in my skill set when the van was converted, I reckon I could probably do it now having seen it done. However, I definitely don't have the skills to drop the diesel tank and fit the fuel lines into the sender, so that was money well spent. For convenience, I've split the electrical spend into 2 parts. First part is the big ticket stuff, so solar panel, the chargers, lights and the batteries. Obviously you don't necessarily have to buy Victron chargers and controllers. I went for them because they've got a very good record of reliability. You also probably don't need to buy 2 batteries if you live south of the Scottish border. Those of you who have seen the build videos will know that I overspecified the wiring to reduce the resistance and increase efficiency, and the incremental cost isn't that great compared to some of the other electrical items that you're going to need to spend money on. Whilst you don't need the industrial grade isolator, you will need an isolator of some sort in the system. Biggest spend in the glues and screws and bolts and so on was the Sikaflex 512. Everything in the van is glued and screwed, and I used a lot of Sikaflex to do that. The screws and the bolts, etc. was marine grade stainless steel, really to try and avoid rusting once everything was fitted together and you couldn't get to them. This is really just a list of nice to haves. As you can see, the BF Goodrich all-terrain tyres take up the majority of the cost. The fire extinguisher and carbon monoxide detector are just common sense really, and the Vanex curtains are really good, so I can recommend those. If you're thinking of putting BF Goodrich all-terrains on your van, then you might want to take a look at the video on my YouTube channel and the discussion thread. So these are the totals, where core spend is the must-haves from my point of view, and the optionals are the added extras, the nice-to-haves. So as you can see, it's a significant investment, and it took a heck of a lot longer to earn than it did to spend, that's for sure. Context for me is I wanted to build something really robust to last my retirement, and when I was able to access my pension fund, I could make the investment. But the reality is that most people don't want to spend this sort of money on a camper van conversion, and they definitely don't want to wait until they retire to do it. My daughter spent just over £4,000 converting her medium wheelbase Sprinter, and she's lived in it for the best part of 2 or 3 years in the UK and across Europe. So I thought it might be quite interesting for people to see what would happen if I take my van design and apply my daughter's van build approach and see how much the price comes down. Albeit whilst retaining some elements from my van build, like the toilet. Just to keep it consistent, going through each stage. Top right is my spend, bottom right is the new spend with the cost saving, and bottom left is the new running total with the cost saving. The cells highlighted in yellow are where I'm making changes to my spend to bring the cost down. Not saving much so far, I hear you say, but wait for it. The changes to the furniture spend assume you keep the same layout, but the big spend in my case was obviously the Morland plywood and the wallboard. Changes to the water system assume no shower and no hot water, and just having running water coming out the tap in the sink. Obviously the Webasto boiler and hob were always a huge part of the cost of my build, but you can always fit a diesel heater at a later date. For solar power, there are obviously cheaper deals around, and you can always buy a second leisure battery at a later date. Savings here are self-explanatory. You're going to be using less wiring, and as I said before, I really went overboard with the Sikaflex. Just to summarise, so far I've spent just over £15,200 on the van conversion. That's not including the cost of the van itself. However, if you subtract the optional extras like the tyres, the wheel carrier, the awning, some of the fitting, then you come back to about £12,800 all in. And as you've seen, if you use cheaper materials, lose the boiler, lose the heater, and spend less on the equipment, you come down to about £4,800. And I've absolutely no doubt you could get well below the £4,800 if you bought second-hand equipment on eBay and recycled wood, furniture and so on. It's all good.